everybody, and welcome to another edition of the American Society of Landscape Architects Ask Me Anything events, brought to you by the Emerging Professionals Committee of ASLA. My name is Daniel Martin. I am with Permalock Corporation, and I am the chair of the Emerging Professionals Committee, and happy to be with you and be your host today. Be sure to use the comment section right here on the Facebook Live to put in any questions that you may have for our very special guest today, who I am happy to introduce. We have with us the one and only world famous Mia Lehrer. Mia Lehrer and Associates in Los Angeles. Mia, welcome and thank you for joining.
Good morning, or good afternoon in some places. Wonderful to be here. To share with Permalock the emerging professionals and you, Daniel. The next hour, I am sitting in my office along the LA River in our studio warehouse. We are working on several interesting projects, including projects along the LA River, and also a number of interesting sort of big residential projects, as well as parks, and even gardens. We love to do gardens. So I was born in El Salvador in Central America, and I came to the U.S. in the 1970s when there was a little war down there, and my father decided to send us away. And I grew up in that beautiful, beautiful country with a wonderful sort of volcanic, tropical, water-laden place. Arrived in the East Coast in Boston, where I spent 9 years. Getting and adjusting to snow and cold and mugginess, and ended up studying and meeting my husband at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard. And there was a little recession, and some of you might have lived through a recession. I've lived through 3 already. And so there was not much work in the East Coast, but there was work in the West Coast. So we came out here where he was from. And I'm happy to call sunny California my home for the last 40 years. A very special place, a place that's in need of the kind of work that we do, the kind of mending of our city and our landscapes. So I'm here and got all my tools in the trade through the work that I did at Tufts and then at Harvard. And I worked for Pete Walker at PWP for some time, and started my own practice, building gardens and then schools and then parks and other civic spaces. So that was my discovered landscape architecture at an exhibit at the Graduate School of Design, where Olmsted's drawings of Central Park's competition. They were 10 feet long and 3 feet high, and there was beautiful hand drawings and of layers of the park. And I was just stunned about what that profession could possibly be, because I only knew planning, I knew architecture, and urban design, and I really didn't know that there was an in-between interesting profession. But I learned that by going to an exhibit, and the rest was history. I went upstairs to meet the new chair at the School of Design at Harvard, who had just started the program, and that was Peter Walker. And that's when I decided to switch from planning to landscape architecture. Did 3.5 years and moved west. No, after I graduated, I went to work for POD, project, which is a firm that eventually was, absorbed by other firms. I worked there for a number of years. Then then moved up to LA and eventually joined Pete for a few years only. But yes, but he's always been a mentor. And it didn't matter whether I was doing gardens or smaller projects. He was always very curious and interested and supportive, and always had strong opinions about, and ideas of in terms of nurturing and mentoring my passions. Yes, Michael Lehrer Architects. He's an architect, and we have our three best designs, 3 kids. And today, 37 years ago today, I became a mother for the first time with our son Benjamin, who actually works with Michael Lehrer in his architecture practice. Keeping the funny business, something I can share with emerging professionals. Also, how to try to be a parent and a professional is an interesting balance.
As those of you who join us on a regular basis know, we start each one of these Ask Me Anything events with the same 6 questions, kind of give us a baseline and get things rolling. But I want to remind everybody that while we are going through this, you may start entering your questions into the comment section right here on the Facebook Live post at any time, and we will get to as many questions as we possibly can. So keep those questions coming in. But let's go ahead and get started with our starting 6. So Mia, we just talked about you getting started and how you got to where you are. So thinking back to those days, those early days, if you could go back in time and tell your younger landscape architect self one thing, what would that one thing be that you wish you would have known back then that you know now?
I would say that make sure you love what you're doing, and that I think that this profession is about passion and an appreciation of design and contributing to the world, and that the tools we get in school really can contribute tremendously. And that if it's a job, you should ask yourself a question. If it's a 9-to-5 job, you can't wait to get out of there. For a question, do I really want to be here? Why don't I want to be here? And what am I? And within the profession, of course, there's many ways to go. And don't forget that private practice is not for everybody. That contributing to cities, counties, states, parks departments, we as people in private practice need you in all those positions. And being a mayor and understanding design is another great one. So I just think always reflect on yes, live-work balance, but yes, am I loving what I'm doing, and what can I do that really brings my profession to bear in this day and age.
Love doing what you love and finding success and rewards in that. That's great advice. And when you first started off, what was that one avenue or channel that you tended to love the most? I know you mentioned garden design.
Yeah. So I loved building. And I only worked at Pod for a few years, and there in the 1970s, 80s, firms were not very kind to young mothers in some ways. It was hard to juggle. So I started building projects, getting design projects, and I fell into the Hollywood industry. So a lot of great producers, directors, filmmakers, actors were my clients, and I learned, and so those, I found that I was learning a lot by going to the nurseries, by stopping at construction sites to see how steel was getting put in, by associating myself with interesting suppliers. There was a wonderful stone supplier that taught me everything about stone that I could ever have wanted to know. And fountain supplies, whatever it was, I was just always, basically, a lot of things I was doing for the first time. I fell into the hole of a swimming pool when I was 7 months pregnant with my third child. So I'm just, it wasn't very, he lived to tell the tale and I lived to tell the tale, but just building and enjoying what you're doing, building relationships with your clients and building relationship with the contractors can be the foundation for a great sort of career.
In there, and we're gonna skip around a little bit here. In the 80s, being a pregnant woman was maybe not so great or so easy. Do you see that there have been changes in those regards, and what challenges does a woman in landscape architecture still have, maybe that they didn't have before, or that a male wouldn't have?
Thank you for bringing it back to the emerging professionals, because that matters a lot to me. And my goal has always been to sort of nurture the young parents. And by the way, obviously physically it's the mother that carries most of the brunt, but there are a lot of fathers who are very engaged in their children and their young children's lives. And I think that a lot of, I came to the conclusion that I just had to, not do what the laws told me I had to do. I had to do what I felt was right. And a mother having a baby cannot come back to work after 2 months. And it's probably more like 3 or 4 months. And then there is the part-time Friday off or shorter hours. So we try to work with young parents in terms of their initial times off, but also picking children up at 5 o'clock from daycare or school, and finding ways of respecting each other, in terms of how time gets allocated. If you have to be home for 3 days because your child was sick, there's something else you might have to do to sort of supplement that time on the weekend, or set yourself up in such a way that you can cover for your unexpected circumstances. But just a level of flexibility, appreciation, and respect. And the same goes for people wanting to take time to travel or to learn or to take courses or to take the exam. We have a little yearly sort of travel competition we do that people can go. They have to submit a proposal and they go for a month. We pay for their travel and their time, and it's just about nurturing intellect and soul. So, but so I think it's a different time.
Make those things easier.
Thank you for bringing that up. That definitely makes it much easier. We, for example, now have a small office in San Francisco, and we're in touch all the time. We're actually trying to find the right platform to do that. For some of our clients, we're doing exchange of materials through several digital platforms like 360. And so we're trying to figure out a way that you don't have to email yourself every day or call every day, but instead just ping someone and say, by the way, we just heard that this has been resolved. So absolutely, people working at home. We do have, for example, one of the Olmsted mid-career fellows in our office, and she spends Monday at home working on the LAF mid-career fellowship. but the same goes for younger parents and others who, have, it's important to say though that at a certain size and with certain scale projects, order and discipline is important. So you have to find a way of saying, which days people are off that are similar.
Operation in the studio, everyone actually being present as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and move to our second preliminary question. You might have touched on this a little bit, but maybe there's a further answer or a different answer. But who or what has had the biggest impact on your career thus far?
Okay. Who or what has had the biggest impact on my career thus far? Well, in the sense that, Peter Walker, I always say lovingly, is my mentor-tormentor, in the sense that striving for the kind of level of preciseness and intellect and beauty in the design, and just never giving up, and also being an incredible mentor, selfless in many ways. I think he was someone who inspired me. But I would also say that there are a number of women like Cornelia Overlander with him, and feisty Martha Schwartz, and then some of the younger women that I've worked with who are always pushing and really excited about the future in our profession. They're the emerging professionals themselves, and I have some. Obviously there's some amazing men in our firm who are also very passionate and very sort of interested in design and in the contributions we make. But so I would say I would can it into that there's a younger generation of At what point are you an emerging professional age, Daniel? Are you like on the verge of the way out of the? What age group? What age group is that? Yeah. Yes. Okay. Okay, I got it. Well, I would say that obviously your professors, but the people you work with in your offices that are actually, we really try to nurture people in the office to find their strengths, but also to have a well-rounded experience in the office, so that they can start strategizing for themselves what it is that they like to do within.
All right, we'll move on to the next one. We'll keep moving. We do have quite a few questions coming in from the audience already. We will get to those, so everybody just kind of stay tuned, and if you have questions, keep putting them in there. But let's move to our third starting question. What is the best thing about being a landscape architect working in the field of landscape architecture? What's your favorite part of the profession?
I guess the glass is never quite full or empty, I guess. I love building. I love going to construction sites. I love talking to the workers and just kind of moving big boulders around. I mean, it makes me really excited. But I love getting in front of a group of elected officials and talking to them about why design or why landscape architecture, landscape urbanism is important, and what a difference we can make, and being an advocate, I guess. I have a presentation that I do, which is advocacy by design. In other words, without a project like the one I have behind here, which is the park that's going to be built downtown LA, I couldn't be advocating for, sustainability or resiliency or, sort of all the issues that we all care about.
All right, and this is a question we ask everybody just because it's kind of an ongoing debate, and I know that you do some teaching at USC, so maybe this comes into debate there. But in the big scheme of things, hand drawing or computer graphics, which way do you go?
I've got, I'm a hand graphics lady, but I have gotten to appreciate, the importance and the nuances and the richness and the sophistication of computer graphics. I still think that sometimes to get an idea across, doing a quick hand sketch is important, but it doesn't have to be so fancy or. So I do think people lose that touch. It's a shame because sometimes to communicate, you're funny, you're fiddling with your computer for 15 minutes when you could be just doing a sketch on a piece of paper. But that's what. Yes.
And along those lines, are there any skills or traits that you think every landscape architect should have? Or like when you're looking to hire people for your firm, what are you looking for? What skills are the most important?
So one set of skills is the graphics, basically communicating graphically. But the other is being able to communicate in written form ideas. That was a big surprise to me. How do you communicate, a complex set of issues on a project? How do you get it down to sort of the essence in such a way that you can get in front of your client, in front of your teammates, and actually be able to speak to it very succinctly? And I think that was communications, I guess, would be one of those skills that I would find very helpful.
And then finally is our Willy Wonka question. If you were given a golden ticket or a magic genie that you could go and visit any landscape in the world, where would you like to go? What landscape?
One landscape?
Oh boy, yeah. Well, if you have more, you can share more. But what's the mother?
The mother? Oh my God. Well, I would want. I guess I'll say two things. One is two places. One, I want to go to Bhutan. I've never been, and I understand it's an incredibly beautiful, very varied country. And the other, my grandson's favorite movie is Madagascar. So I really want to go with him to Madagascar. There you go. Mm-hmm. Whoa. The favorite landscapes that I have been to. Wow. That is a really, really hard one for me. I guess I have to go to the tropics and go to some of the Borla Marx gardens because it brings my life in in the tropics, the volcanic sort of geology, the tropical forests. So somewhere in between Borla Marx and the Amazon is where I would say my heart kind of starts sort of beating fast.
Great job on the opening six. And we are going to start taking some questions from the audience now. There are quite a few of them coming in here, so let's get going. Our first question comes from Callie. Not California, don't get too excited. Her name is Callie. Callie says, not doing your undergraduate degree in landscape architecture, did you ever feel behind in the beginning of your career, at your first job, for instance? Did you feel like you had catching up to do?
No. I mean, only because I went for 3.5 years to graduate school, so that felt like undergrad. I also had I took geology and a few courses because I was interested that actually turned out to be very helpful. So if the question is, do you really need to go to graduate school? That's the subtext. I'd say maybe at some point in your career, it might really give you, you might be curious about something that you don't know, and so you would probably want to do it. But I felt really that I had important skills by the time I graduated. So.
USC, which is a grad program, you feel that those students coming out of that program are prepared for their career even if they didn't have an undergrad in landscape architecture?
Yes, and I've also taught at Harvard, so I want to say, and I'll be teaching there in the spring. I think that yes, I think that people, it's also not only what the university does for you, but what you do for yourselves. And if you find that there's certain skills that you're lacking, because not everybody starts from the same place, it's about looking for the support.
All right, our next question is coming in from Francisco, and he wants to know if you would need work experience, or do you think you need work experience before starting the exams towards acquiring a license? So as an emerging professional, it's important to do some work in a firm or such before you start the licensure process.
Yes, I think so, that's really important. Because it's not just about getting a license, but it's about understanding, how to put a package together, what the issues are with regards to health and safety. Yes, experience is very valuable, and I'd say I would trump experience for at least 3 years before even starting, so that you just let it go, learn everything you can in a practice or in a city hall or in wherever you're going to work, and then start looking at the class studying for the test.
Mm-hmm. And at your firm, obviously, I think you said a 40-member firm. When you bring in younger people, do you encourage them to move towards licensure?
Yes. Usually after about 3 to 5 years experience, and we pay for the preparation and for the exam and for the license for as long as they're here. Yep. Yeah, we had a very big crop last year. I think about 10 people got their licenses. Mm-hmm.
Well, with a benefit like that, you're going to be getting a lot of applications, I think. That's huge. All right. Next question comes from the famous Daniel Rodriguez from the University of Florida. He says, do you listen to podcasts? And if there were a landscape architecture-based podcast, what relevant issue would you want to hear about?
What a good question. Turns out that my daughter makes a living doing a podcast. It's called Mashup Americans. You should look at it, because if you sound like a Daniel Rodriguez would be interested. It's about multiculturalism, and they interview interesting people about how do you keep your sort of culture, your multiculturalism alive in your family as you move on in life. I would listen to it. I would love to hear more. There's so many of our senior members of our profession, like Cornelia Oberlander or a few others, who would be wonderful to hear and for other people to hear. But I would also like to hear from people from around the country who are doing interesting things. I have a friend, for example, who was a Loeb Fellow and landscape architect who is the mayor of a small town. As a landscape architect, I've met, I just think it would be interesting to hear something I really enjoy about ASLA is going to the conferences and meeting people and attending sessions, and people from all over the country who are doing very different things. And I think podcasts could bring it to people who can't afford to go to conferences, and who, just might find it very interesting. Phytoremediation. I would love to hear a whole podcast on phytoremediation.
Real quickly, the ASLA conference, and going to the conference, you enjoy that this year. The conference is coming to you in Los Angeles, so we're encouraging everybody to go to that. But being a Los Angeles resident, where would you encourage everybody to go see while they're there?
Oh my goodness. First of all, I hope many of you are coming. I think it's going to be a great conference. I would say that go to Griffith Park and go to the observatory. I'll go to the Getty Museum and get a lay of the land. Go down to the beach and go to the Anamur Beach House, which we worked on, but there's a lot of designs by other people right around there. And then the Natural History Museum and Gardens, which are sort of also interesting. I think LA's public transportation system has grown tremendously, and I think you will find it really interesting to see for those of you who are working in big cities or in international cities, how a city can dramatically sort of reposition itself from going from cars to public transportation, or from stormwater to infrastructure that's multi-benefit. And so recalibrating our infrastructure is what we're all about. And don't forget to go to a studio that have open houses, because you would actually really enjoy that experience.
The Landscape Architecture Foundation. I know that you are heavily involved there. You also serve on the boards or on other councils nationally, I'm aware of. Can you talk a little bit about some of those kind of leadership positions that you are currently in, and how you see that, one, helping your career, and two, you helping the profession, and then maybe some of them that aren't necessarily landscape architecture only, how do you feel you're pushing landscape architecture to those environments?
Thank you for bringing that up. It's not always easy touting yourself, but well, I got involved with landscape architecture with LA Landscape Architecture Foundation about 8 years ago. It's a wonderful organization. It is the next phase after we actually have the 2016 declaration that basically was a revamping of the Ian McHarg and others' declaration from that 60 years old was wonderful. I should have had it behind me. I'm going to get some minus points, but I will send it to you so you can remind the emerging professionals that we need them, right? That was a really fun experience. I worked with a lot of my peers on reworking what landscape architecture should mean and how we should present it in a one-page format, and that took about 300 emails going back and forth, and it was awesome, and there were a lot of really healthy arguments. I'm really pleased where we ended up, and we're advocating for the profession at many levels, as well as helping young people with grants and scholarships, and we're always really proud to see that when they come to present to us. So it's been a really rich experience for me, because it makes you come full circle, understanding where you stand, in your sixth decade, and how the younger people are growing, maturing, I sort of feel like I relate more, I'll say, to the young people in their 30s and 40s, and that I really was very interested and passionate about some of the things that, for example, nonprofits that are doing urban acupuncture or urban, I'm the founder and on the board of two of them, grown in LA, growing native plants in California along the river, experimenting with gray water and reclaimed water. And the other is LA Mas for more in Spanish, about, and they're out in the world now. I created them and these things are happening, so that's pretty exciting. And then I'm on the Commission of Fine Arts, CAF, and that was an appointment by another president, and we're all still sort of joining. We're actually the design review body for all the projects in the District of Columbia. We do parks, we do memorials, and we do all the sort of development projects, museums, and we have basically a series of guidelines that the district has created for itself over decades and centuries. And there's 12 people, 3 of us are trained as landscape architects, and 7, one is a museum curator, and the others are architects. It's very exciting, and we're always pushing, and I think for what's best in terms of the public realm in those projects, whether it's the Smithsonian or Eisenhower Memorial or other sort of, or the White House security fence. So anyway, it's all very interesting, always advocating for what we think is best in terms of the public realm and the longevity of these projects. Maintenance matters, and how we build them day one and how they're going to last over decades is really important. And then so there's LAF, there's CAF, and within the city of Los Angeles, I belong to a group that's looking at the open space sort of element of the general plan, and I'm on the zoning advisory committee. So I also belong to the Green LA Coalition, which is all about resiliency and sustainability in California, and just always working as much as possible with some of the ASLA Dwayne Border and the president in trying to make sure that we stay current, and that at City Hall or in the governor's office they understand who we are and what we do. Yeah.
So that brings us into our next viewer question from Maggie Aravina in California. What is 1 or 2 key pieces of advice you would give to young women striving for leadership within the profession or the industry?
Okay. One of the things that I would say is, and I don't know where you live, but for example, in Los Angeles area, we have the Association of Women in Architecture and Design. I think bringing together a small group of women, it could be 2, could be 3, who actually, believe in the same things that you do is really important. So starting a smaller sort of group. And engaging, whether it's in your park, or the way I started a community engagement was in my kids' school, because LAUSD is the largest owner of asphalt in the city, or was at the time. So we took over with the principal's permission, we took over the playground and planted many trees, and did a lot of things around the playground that actually made people realize what I did. And we raised money for an art program. So wherever you are in life, and whatever means something to you, whether it's planting trees in your neighborhood, or bringing bees to the city, or advocating for chickens, any number of those things, literally. I was part of the LA Food Coalition when chickens, not roosters, were legalized. And more recently, bees were legalized in the city, in residential areas. So, I mean, this kind of advocacy and this, and just bringing your professional interests to bear is very much appreciated, whether it's through ULI, ASLA, APA, the school districts, the park districts. They really thrive and rely on volunteerism. And, just chip away at it. Chip away at it till you find that you're putting some roots into the ground.
All right. Next question, we'll jump right in, comes from our friends at Land 8, asking, what creative design solutions has your firm used to address the water crisis in California or elsewhere?
Okay, so creative design solutions? Well, we really believe that water has to be used 3 and 4 times in any given form. So if it arrives as reclaimed water, because it's water from the reclamation plants, that you have to use it in certain type of parts in order for it to get cleansed before you can use it again for irrigation. You might be using it to go through a filtration system that cools the air or allows trees to actually do what grow and thrive. So it's such a deep. I mean, we connect most of our stormwater now into filtration devices, so it can be used once and twice. We just finished the courthouse in downtown Los Angeles, and it turns out that the roofs from the courthouse and much of the generators and equipment are producing a lot of water, and that it's going into all filtration tanks, and now we're ending with excess water, which we hope instead of throwing into the stormwater system, that we hope we're going to be able to use in the adjacent park that we're building. And that means that you have to have the federal government and the Department of Water and Power in the city of Los Angeles talking to one another. So it's deep. I mean, it's deep. How we operate in our we do not all in California have water collection systems like big tanks like I grew up in the tropics, or people do in the Middle East. I think that'll be the next step, but basically creating as much permeability as possible and using the water once and twice and planting native vegetation. And what Grown in LA is doing is having a series of nurseries where we're testing how native plants are going to do with reclamation water. Reclamation water is very high in salt content, and we have had a couple bad experiences, and oaks dying because they don't love salt. So we're, testing all of that and finding out, what it is we could do in the future. But in the meantime, permeability, lots of trees, and gray water, and reusing the water as many times as possible.
Excellent. We'll move right on to the next question. And if anybody out there has more questions, get them in. We're 3/4 of the way through the hour already. But our next question, I guess, is a little more about the firm and practice. How do you market your services or find new work? Is it mostly word of mouth? And has the way you do marketing changed over time?
Really good question, because we're going through. I would say that initially when I was doing the gardens, and I have to say that I was doing gardens, it was always word of mouth. but I also had a wonderful writer at Sunset Magazine in California who just kind of, followed where my projects and sort of gave me, voice in print. That was always really helpful. So word of mouth, never underestimating a good client, that good client won't then lead to more projects that are of a different scale. So in my case, imagine doing the garden for a very, very interesting, smart, wealthy individual, and then having them refer me to a camp for children with cancer, which was an amazing project. It was the restoration of some beautiful wetlands and very beautifully designed, very important project for families and children with cancer. And that's where I met Paul Newman, Blue Eyes. So that was kind of really important. But, that client that I was doing a garden for referred me, and then that led to other public projects where wetlands were an important feature. So, that's always the tough part, is how do you get to the next project type so somebody doesn't ask you, and they will ask women, young women, so how many of those have you done? How many So when I worked on, when I was working on, there was a project that I was working on that was a residential project, which was in Malibu. It was a very important project from a sustainability perspective. I was being considered for a park project, and they asked me, so how many parks have you done, and what's your biggest budget? And I was kind of in an NDA, and I couldn't talk about how much my budgets were, but I said I can just tell you that I'm doing a project that is, the same budget as your park. So, and how complex it is, and I presented. When I wanted to do, I was being asked to do a big office sort of retail master plan park project too at Playa Vista. I basically took some other projects like it and presented it in the interview, and I did an analysis. This is why I think this project is successful, and this is why this one is also successful but different, and I got the job. So that's just being creative about how to get to the project types. I did do schools, but because I was doing schools with my children, and therefore I got 1 or 2 schools. But really, eventually, that gets really nerve-wracking, because you have a group of people you owe salaries to, and you want to control your budgets. And so I learned from a friend that you can sign up on a list at many of the school districts or departments, proprietary departments in cities, or and then be considered for get on a list so you can get certain projects. And so those lists become really important. I'm just helping out right now for a group of emerging professionals locally to learn what list we got on and what that was like, and if that was helpful. But I think what I've learned now is, first of all, yes, the word of mouth has helped me. So when we got the park, the big Hollywood Park project, which includes the Rams Stadium and 25 acres of parks and 3,500 units of housing and a retail center. It was basically, they came to interview us. We had a reputation. We've done some work for the Dodgers, and then it just went on. But I find that I want to control my future more. And so we are, as of this next year, we will be having soon a more full-time focused business development marketing person, so we can because we find ourselves reacting often, and I need a sounding board as much as anything to be able to sort of control. And I will say one thing too, I'm considered a regionalist, and that's supposed to be kind of a bad thing, because I'm not all over the world doing work, and not like I'm not interested, not like I haven't done work in Brazil or in Central America, and not that I've done work in China, but I've focused in California. It is the 8th economy in the world, and it has a very unique set of issues and problems, and they need our skills, and I really like being engaged in the community and in my place at all levels. So not to say that I wouldn't go anywhere else, and we are applying, we've been looking at some interesting work in other states. And that's what I think a professional would help us figure out. Is it better to do more of small projects in one place rather than one bigger project or more significant or different type of project in another place? So that's kind of an answer to, I think that having someone with, once my office grew to 12, I always had a designer who really liked to write, who liked business development. And they would always be doing a project or two, but they'd also be helping putting the proposals together. I had a partner who had, worked at SWA and had gone to the GSD, and she really liked doing that work too, and doing contracts. So it's not just doing the business development, because then you got to do the contracts, right? So having a person who really likes doing that or doesn't mind doing it and is good at it within a practice, once it gets to be 5 or 6 people strong, you start needing someone who can do those things, and helping out sort of the billing and all that good stuff.
Sometimes we don't get into like the business side of practice in these, so it's good to hear and have some of that conversation. Mm-hmm. All right, so this is an interesting question, a little different than the ones we've had so far. Are there musicians you absolutely could not go to the drafting table without listening to?
Oh my goodness. Wow. Geez, I'm kind of, my age might show a little bit here. Musicians. I happen to love Adele, and I happen to, who doesn't? I happen to love Adele. I'm basically a fanatic of the voice. So of course I do love Maroon 5. And Alicia Keys is like one of my heroes. But I like jazz, Latin music, and that would probably be my background music before I would start listening to Adele and try to remember what she really, the story she's trying to tell me. Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question.
It was a good one. We're about 6 minutes out, so I think we're going to end with asking, we talked about some of the different projects you've worked on over your career, but thinking about all the projects, what would you say your favorite project you ever worked on was, and why would that be?
God, that is really intense. But Daniel, at this point you'll know me well, because I'll say there's 2 projects, and it has to do also with the clients and the experience. One is the Ricardo Legarreta project for Joel Silver, the creator of The Matrix. And it's a garden. It's not a small garden. It's a big garden. But he let me create and think beyond the box, and just use materials really gets into the spirit of the designer's head. So I got to do a maze because I told him he couldn't have a tennis court because it was not environmental. It made no sense environmentally. So he said, well, why don't do a tennis court? What would you do? And I said, I had to think fast, and I had to say that he should collect art, which he did. He got a Richard Serra and a few other pieces. And he said, well, what would I do with that space? And I said, well, I've never done a maze before. And sure enough, there was a maze. And of course, it had a Ricardo fountain falling in the center. So, and that project is the project that keeps on giving. Every so often it grows. And I really just appreciate and respect him. And then the other is the Natural History Museum Gardens, and that's the 5 acres of gardens around the Natural History Museum, where an asphalt parking area where a lot of Angelinos used to park in order to go into the museum, opened itself up and opened it up to become a garden and an urban ecological laboratory. And so the opportunity of like really taking the gardens, taking an asphalt parking lot, turning it into a series of gardens, watching oaks, which are usually so slow growing, or sycamores and others grow so fast just because they were in the city and trying to prove themselves to somebody. Having millions of people enjoy and understand. We did a performative landscape. Know that it's 99% permeable. None of the stone walls have any grout or anything. We're with great structural engineers, a great contractor, and the scientists, which I called my ologists on this museum, actually helped us define the type of plant material. And the criteria was plants that attracted the most habitat. So it didn't have to be native, just habitat. So we have flocks of parakeets and parrots, and we have, basically, we haven't had a snake yet, but we have everything else. It's one of the birdiest counties in the country, and the Urban Ecological Laboratory has proven itself in spades. There's a citizen science program online that's done really, really well. We have a tremendous amount of educational programming, podcasts, and many other things. It all comes together at the Natural History Museum, and it's really exciting.
Over.
Yeah, it's right next to the Expo line, so you can actually get there on the Expo line. My least favorite project. Oh my God. Do I really have to?
No, you don't have to.
I don't have to say my least. I would say that there were a project or two that I won't mention that were sort of classical villas where I ended up not following my heart or my sort of design DNA, but having to sort of reflect the aspirations of some of the ownership, and it just wasn't that much fun.
All right. Well, we are.
So, but I want to leave it on a positive note,
yes.
because I have some other really great clients now. And everybody, and I think that the city of Los Angeles and the county is all really, we're hopping here. And I think it's public knowledge that our mayor is getting some kind of a honorary ASLA membership. So that's pretty exciting. And he's a big believer in what we do. And I hope all of you convince him to be more of a believer and to really strive higher even. So looking forward, and I would say one last thing to the young women who get frustrated because it's hard to balance carrying a family and a business. Don't give up. Stay connected. Because if you disconnect and start doing other things and disconnect from the profession or your life or being productive, it's really hard to get back. And I have seen it with several of the women in my office who dropped off, and it's been really hard for them. Once their kids are teenagers, they don't want you around 100% of the time. So, you know, we need you. We need the most people in the profession to stay engaged. So just take it a little easy, but don't disconnect, please.
That is solid advice, and all of your advice today was phenomenal, and we're already at the top of the hour. It went by so fast. So thank you very, very much, Mia, for joining us and for sharing your experience and your wisdom with the emerging professionals and students of the ASLA. And we will all see you in October, for sure. And the comments, there have been many people asking how to get a job at your firm. So I will just refer them to your website and contact somebody from there.
Yes, it's mia@mlagreen.com, and thank you, Daniel Martin, and thank you, emerging professionals. Thank you, SLA and Permalog, and go ASLA.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that, we will sign off. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Be sure to join us next month, August 8th at 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll be announcing our guest for next month very soon, but I'm sure it will be another great one. And if we didn't get to your questions, I'm sorry, but join us next time, and hopefully we'll get to you then. Have a great day, everyone, and we are signing off.